3, 2, 1. And here we go again, conversations with interesting people, but today things are going to be a little bit different. We're trying to move into something that's maybe a little more topical than we usually do, and I want to kind of set this up because I figure a lot of the people viewing this or listening to this are going to be people that kind of know what's going on. But for those of you that aren't kind of in our more national, international audience, on the 5th of November, the citizens of the state of Iowa, where we are, went to the polls all across the state to vote for a variety of offices and so forth. And in my wife's little hometown of Fairfield, Iowa, in the southeast part of the state, the voters went to elect a new mayor. And there were 3 candidates running at that time, Councilman Michael Halley and Mrs. Connie Boyer, and a local attorney named Ed Noyes. And just based on Iowa law, which we might let Councilman Halley here explain to us a little bit more, but as I understand it, you have to get 50% of the overall vote in order to win. And as the numbers shook out, Councilman Halley got 1,055 votes, which was 47.57% of the vote, so you came close. Mrs. Boyer came in second with 883 votes, which is 39.81%, and then Mr. Noyes had 277 with 12%. And so because of that, even though Councilman Halley got more of the popular vote, there's going to be a runoff election on the 3rd of December to decide who will in fact be the mayor of Fairfield. So for those of you listening that aren't from Iowa or don't know about Fairfield, it's like, well, what are we doing here? I mean, it's one small town and we're kind of doing this, this thing about small town mayors. Well, first of all, I think in general, and I'm not a constitutional scholar or anything like that, but I am a history nerd. And the way that I understand the government was supposed to be set up, the majority of power was supposed to lie in the local government, and then next the state government, and then the federal government. The idea being that people like the mayor, the council people, that kind of thing, know more about what's going on with the people. And I think that the majority of people kind of let these kind of elections pass them by, which is too bad, because we think about, the right to vote, and today is Veterans Day, we're filming this, and I'm a veteran, and I can ask you if you are later, but we serve and we want to be able to vote, but a lot of us don't get involved in those local elections. So I think it's good to highlight that. And then secondly, this is sort of like my wife's hometown, and I do want to say for the record that neither my wife nor I are registered voters in this town. We don't have a dog in this fight, but it's a town that we love so much. And it's such a unique little place where you might say all worlds meet in this little town. So joining me today is Councilman Michael Halley. And welcome.
Thank you.
And I definitely, rather than me sort of just keep pontificating about this little town and why people outside of the city might care about it, why don't you give us a little overview of Fairfield, Iowa, and what it is and then what it means to you?
Sure. So the city of Fairfield, Iowa is 180 years old. And it has a long history of being an innovative, open-minded community, going back almost to its founding. It's always had a university in the community, though that's changed over time. And it's always had, I guess, what you might call big thinkers. And in more recent history, in 1975, Maharishi International University, which later changed its name to Maharishi University of Management, took the old college campus in town, bought it, and moved a bunch of students, staff and faculty, and people kind of following in that group to Fairfield, Iowa. So what you got was small Midwestern town meets New Age, meditation, and people from all over the world. And as you can imagine, initially there was friction, and that friction has existed since then to some extent. But over time, what you got was a blending and a recognition that that the diversity and the kind of what you might call alternative lifestyle was actually something that people found interesting. It was actually something that people from other places wanted to come in and take a look at. And so our previous mayor, Mayor Ed Malloy, who was elected in 2001, was really instrumental in kind of changing the story from being embarrassed of having this kind of unusual university to being proud of having this unusual eclectic community. And so one of the things that happened was Fairfield was selected by the state of Iowa as one of its first great places. And so I think, according to Mayor Malloy, that really galvanized this identity for people from Fairfield that we are an interesting place and that we've been recognized as such. And so Great Places is kind of a tourism grant process. So it's the state of Iowa wanting to recognize cities that would be attractive to tourists. And then they have grants available to beautify or embellish your community. And so we just got redesignated, by the way. So we're still a great place. But that was really a turning point in the community where we started to embrace the values of everyone. So we have the small town Midwestern values, and we have a really large interest in things like sustainability, arts and culture, vegetarian food, health and wellness. And so the community is thriving, and even in population-wise growing, when so many other small towns, even in Southeast Iowa especially, are shrinking. So there's something about Fairfield that's making people want to be there. And we do have a lot of unique businesses and a lot of unique attractions that you probably won't find anywhere else, not just in Iowa, but probably even the Midwest. So I think that's kind of a short version of our story, of our history.
One of the interesting things about Fairfield, I met who is now my wife 6 years ago. And since then, I can't seem to go anywhere without running into somebody who's connected to Fairfield. And the councilman just gave us a very nice sort of overview of that. Let me give you the less sort of polished version to say that, Fairfield, it's a little bit like West Side Story in some ways, where if you hang around there, and if any of you ever get a chance, I recommend going for the food, if nothing else. Oprah did a big series on Fairfield. Jim Carrey spoke at the graduation not that long ago, and there's a great article where he went to a Burger King and ran into a baseball team. Paul McCartney's son is there. I met him once. And so for those of you that he mentioned Maharishi University, Fairfield is, I don't know if it's the world headquarters or the U.S. headquarters for transcendental meditation. And so the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who I don't know a ton about, although I've been married to a Fairfielder for a while. For those of you that are fans of the Beatles and the song Across the Universe, they sing the words Jai Guru Dev Om. Well, Guru Dev was Maharishi's teacher. And so you get these famous people that'll come in and stay at the Raj or something like that. And Stephen Fry had as part of one of his documentaries. So you sort of have this East meets West, if you will. And so to paint the picture for those of you who haven't been there, on what they call the towny side of Fairfield, it's like any other Iowa town you'd ever see. It's Pizza Ranch and Hy-Vee and the farm store and just good salt of the earth Iowans. And then on the other part of town, you start to see this Vedic East Indian architecture, everything sort of facing to the east. There are different shrines to some of the different Hindu gods, and people talking about, enlightenment and all these sort of meditative techniques. The golden domes are there. And so again, there's this kind of thing of how did these two come together? So I said long before I met you, which was only a few minutes ago, but when I first was around Fairfield, that somebody like Mayor Malloy has a job that I would guess is much more difficult than the average small town mayor, because you kind of have to deal with both sides of this community. So how long have you been in Fairfield?
I've been in Fairfield for 26 years. So I moved to Fairfield from a small town in Ohio when I was 18, fresh out of high school. And I'd visited another university in Ohio that I was also looking at, and I visited MUM. And what convinced me to come to Fairfield was the people. I just find that the international aspect, I've met people from every continent, many, many different countries. I could probably travel the world and stay with people I know pretty easily. I just found that intriguing and just a lot of fun. And so I came and did a couple years at the university. They didn't really have the program I was looking for, and it wasn't necessarily a great fit. So, and then after that, I started my own business with my now ex-wife, and so that was a lot of fun, big adventure. But to answer the question or the comment about difficulty, I suppose somewhat compared to a town that was more homogenous, but there's also a benefit to it. And that is that, for better or worse, it is a draw for people to come and see the Vedic architecture, these buildings facing east with these little Hershey Kiss ornaments on the top. And you mentioned the Raj, which is a health spa outside of town that has brought a lot of famous people, and they've kind of kept it low key, but that's where Jim Carrey stayed when he came to speak at the commencement. He was the commencement speaker for MUM graduation a few years back. So there is something that's interesting, and you can just look around the whole country and see there's a big interest in yoga, and meditation is now being prescribed by doctors for stress relief. And so, TM really hit its peak in the 70s. And most of the people who came and kind of answered the call to come and meditate in groups, and that's what the Golden Domes are. They meditate in a group, and the theory is that has a positive effect on the whole world. And so the people who answered that call are mostly baby boomers, and that adds an interesting dynamic to our community, having this larger than average baby boomer population. It's something that I've addressed in terms of, if we really want to grow Fairfield and for the future, we have to invite the younger families and the younger working age people. So there are challenges, but for the most part, I always talk about Fairfield like it's a family, because that's how it feels. And in that way, some people might look at other people as kind of the little bit crazy cousin, but they're family, and so you tolerate. And I think that's what has amazed me about Fairfield, is how tolerant people are. I mean, we get some really interesting things even going on sometimes at city council, and you just roll with it. You take people as people, and I think the community as a whole has been really good about that. I think if there's intolerance, it's kind of quiet, just kind of okay, what are those people up to this time type mentality, but not angry, not violent. You don't see, anybody ranting in the local paper in the letter to editor section. Maybe that used to happen, but a big part of that was business people coming together. So meditator, call them meditators, or people who practice TM, were associated with the university. And then locals or townies, is a common term in university towns for those not associated with the university. And they started coming together to do business, and that broke down some barriers. And then their children, who don't really jive with the names and the labels, became friends, some got married. And so you have this blending on that level as well. And now they're a third generation. So there are, like, my children are grandchildren of TM teachers. My parents were TM teachers back in the day, and my ex-wife's father was as well. And so now the third generation. And it's just really interesting to see, because my kids are native Fairfieldians. They were born in Fairfield. And so they're natives, but also descendants of meditators. So the whole thing now is the lines are blurred. There's a large group of the population that have never practiced TM and aren't interested in it, but aren't native to Fairfield and are attracted to the other aspects of the community. The things I mentioned before, that it's a little bit more progressive, a little bit more open-minded and accepting. And so we have different groups in our community who are just there because it's a cool place to be.
Sure. So you came to Fairfield for college, opened a business for all these varieties of reasons, decided you're going to stay and you're going to make your family and make your home in Fairfield. Yep. So, when we think about, I think any political position, but specifically, we'll try that again, in a small town, I think that, there's a lot of community involvement, things that need to go on. And I know that I don't know how long you've been on the council, it's one thing I'm going to ask you. So, what are some things that you've done in the community that you feel sort of qualify you for this job and make you the best choice for the next mayor of Fairfield, Iowa?
All right, great question. All right, so I have been on the council since my 10th year. So end of the year will be 10 years consecutively. So before I got on the council, I was the president of our volunteer center board for 3 years. president of our Visitors Bureau Board for 3 years. And then after getting on the council, I joined our Chamber of Commerce Board and was their board president for 2 years. So it seems to be, I come into a group, and in those instances, I never asked to be their president. The fellow board members kind of pushed me forward into that role. And so those qualities of just building consensus, working towards solutions, keeping everyone on track, come naturally to me. I've chaired a lot of meetings, and people have said that they appreciate my leadership style for my inclusivity. They're always the people who speak the loudest. I'll ask the people who are the quietest for their input, because I want everyone's input. That's the whole point of having a group. That's why we have a council of city council, not one person who makes all the decisions. So 10 years ago, I ran for city council as an extension of service to the community, which I had really started to devote my life to post-divorce. I could talk about that more later, but to me it was an outlet, and it felt like I really felt compelled to give back. And then being a father, you want the community to be as good as it can be for your children. So got on the council, started in 2010, and just jumped in with both feet. You mentioned you're a history nerd. I'm a city government nerd. I really dive into this kind of stuff, and I geek out on it. I love to learn the nuances. I love to learn how each department functions. I love to learn some nerdy legal stuff. Just really kind of wrap my head. I want to see the whole picture and how the parts connect to that. And so I've always worked closely with our city administrators over the years. We've had several, and become a person that city employees can contact and bounce ideas off of. Just to state that a city council person by themselves has no authority. City council person's only authority is when the group is meeting, there's a quorum present, and a majority of that quorum takes an action. So by myself, I'm not an authority who can direct the city employees and what they're doing, but I am somebody they can talk to because they know I care and that I think about these things a lot. And sometimes I have answers to questions they have, because I got involved with the Iowa League of Cities years ago. They have a municipal leadership program. I did the first class right after I got elected. I found out there was more, so I took those, and I've served on some committees with them. And I mean, they're a wonderful resource. Anybody in the city, anytime you're unclear on something in terms of how does this work legally, you can contact the League of Cities. So I've got a pretty good resume in terms of if the mayor were a job, just the 10 consecutive years of experience, the last 2 years as mayor pro tem. So mayor pro tem is one council member the mayor selects to fill in whenever he or she is unavailable. So I chaired a council meeting last year and then one again this year. And I can say, even from the first one being very nervous to this last one feeling much more relaxed, it was great practice in a sense. And I've been somebody, like I said, that people can come to, even though I'm just one of seven. I pride myself in being open to listening, to being available to communicate, to responding quickly. I don't like to leave people hanging, so if I get a phone call, I try to call them back the same day. And most of the time, it's not that I have the answers to everything, but I can direct them to where they can get them. And in that way, I've kind of served as this hub of, people can come to me and I'll direct them where they need to go. And an extension of that was when I founded the city's Facebook page in 2013 with the council's vote, to approve it. And I've been managing that thing ever since. So every weekday I try to post something, and I've probably answered hundreds, if not over 1,000 different questions of all varieties. People message or they post on there. And so it's something that is important to me, because when I was running for city council, I'd sit in the council meetings and watch, trying to absorb and kind of prep myself where I'd win. And I couldn't follow what was being talked about. At the time, the information was just printed and it was in front of the council members, but the audience couldn't see. And no one was giving any sort of context to what was being talked about, because they all knew what it was. So as someone trying to follow along, it wasn't easy. Now we've got a couple of screens in the council chambers so people can see if we're looking at a map or if we're looking at a document. And and we've got the Facebook. And I do an interview program. I was doing it before when we had a radio station, and the radio station has since closed, so I do it now just once a month. Call it City Biz, and it's just a quick recap of some highlights of things that have happened. So I've also written some guest columns to the local paper. So these are the kind of things that, been very involved, really understand it very well, and in a sense, with our 18-year mayor stepping down, it just makes sense for me, in a sense, to kind of graduate to the next level. And there are some issues that I've had some frustration as a council member seeing that we're not being addressed by the city, maybe not so much the city government, but just the community in general, that I want to bring to light.
Oh, that was a beautiful hook to lead me into my next question. You read my mind. Although, just to lighten the mood for 1 second, I do want to tell a quick Fairfield joke based on what he said. So I think I don't know that we've said this, but the normal people are the townies, and then the meditators are often referred to as the roos. And so the radio station that closed was KRUU. No one that I ever met in my entire life in Fairfield called it KRUU. It was KRU. Yeah. And if you said KRU, people would correct you, and they'd be like, well, it's really... So anyway, I just thought that was funny that it was KRU. But anyway, so the next logical question, obviously, was going to be, I assume that the term of the mayor is 4 years before you seek... It's 2 years. Okay, so see, I was wrong. Yeah. Once again, I show my own ignorance of local government to know that. So 2 years. So then if the results of the runoff follow this kind of percentage, you will become the next mayor of Fairfield. What are some issues that you see coming up in the next couple of years? And let's forget multiple terms and all that. But what do you want to hit the ground running to sort of look at out of the gate?
Yep. And what you said is exactly what I prioritized. I prioritized issues that we can address right away, not expecting necessarily I'll be around, in that role long term. So wanted to address a certain number of them that need to be addressed soon. The easy ones are, fixing up our roads, kind of obvious if you've driven around the town. And that's it's in a way it's coming naturally. I add that I want to see the city double down on our complete streets policy. I brought this to City Council in 2015. The idea is that the roadway includes not just a lane for the vehicles, but some sort of thought to the cyclists, pedestrians, and disabled people. So you need sidewalks. You need to make them. You need the curb cuts so people can come up on a wheelchair and all that. And it's something the city's kind of been chipping away at. But what I like to see is the city double down and say we're going to add sidewalk or repair sidewalk every year, not just streets, but thinking about the other type of travelers. And then another one that is obvious is our housing. It's not just Fairfield. A lot of small towns in Iowa and the Midwest have aging housing. And part of that are market fluctuations in terms of real estate that just make it so that out-of-town investors aren't looking, or developers aren't looking to build in a small town like Fairfield. They can build in Des Moines, they can build in Iowa City, guaranteed profit. It's a little bit more speculative in a small town. So we need to work to find people who will develop. And if there's some sort of public-private partnership where the city has some say in it, like donating the lot or whatever it takes to get some of those housing, because what we need are quality, affordable housing. We have a lot of aging rentals, and we do have a rental inspection process, but somehow some of the landlords have kind of figured out how to game the system. And so I've heard of some of these conditions that are just unacceptable. They're unsafe. Almost third world in some of these rentals. So those are the easy ones that are, again, anybody could talk about that because it's obvious. Some of the things that have been a little more hidden are the extreme poverty that we are seeing more of in Fairfield. And what comes with that are issues like food insecurity. And food insecurity just simply means that a person doesn't know necessarily they'll have food to eat in the near future. So an example, right now it's more than half of the children in the school system in Fairfield are on free or reduced lunch. Now that says something because that program is or does require verification of income. There are other programs that do not, but that one does. So clearly that's showing that there are a lot of working class people who are not at the level where they're outside of poverty levels. So some of this is, some people talked about minimum wage. The city can't do anything. State law prohibits local governments from raising or lowering their own minimum wage standards. Johnson County tried it. Passed the county supervisors in Johnson County passed something that said the minimum wage would be a higher rate, and Governor Branstad at the time made a law that says you can't do that. You have to go by the federal.
Yeah.
So there's certain things we can't help with, but there's a program the Methodist Church in our town organizes called Carry On Bags. Very simple. They get food, things like peanut butter, granola bars, simple foods like that. They put them in plastic bags, and those are available for school children to take home over the weekend. And that's the food insecurity issue of some children dread weekends, and they dread, say, Christmas vacation, which, you think that anybody would be looking forward to that. They dread it because they don't know they're going to eat during those times. And I can't tell you the reasons why a parent would not provide their children with food. I don't know if there's drug addiction, mental health issues, or what's going on. I can't speak to that. I really would like to, because
sure.
it doesn't make any sense to me as a parent.
Right.
But it's a real issue. It's an issue enough that we have that program, and there are hundreds of bags that are taken home every weekend, hundreds in a town of 10,000. Our food pantry has seen about a 20% increase in the people who are coming to get food from them. So these are real issues.
Yeah.
I posted something on my Facebook page showing Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
And the basic ones are food and shelter and safety. And so if there are members in our community who don't have those needs met, can the community in general call itself prosperous? And I say no. I say we have to help the people who are struggling to get their basic needs met if we're going to call ourselves a compassionate and caring community.
Do you know the breakdown of that? You may not, but we sort of talked about this divided community where you kind of have the town side and then the people associated with the movement. Do you know, is it the poverty kind of equal between the two? Is it sort of lean more one way than the other?
I think it's equal. And again, I don't know all the reasons behind the food insecurity issue, but I was introduced to the idea by the county health office. This was back when I was helping with our Blue Zones initiative, the Health and Wellness initiative. And I didn't know what food insecurity meant, and they had to tell me. And then they showed me statistics, and I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe that was our world. I naively assumed that everyone was doing okay. Now I understand food insecurity is becoming more common in seniors. So a senior who has a very fixed income and medical expenses may have to decide between the drugs they need and a meal. And either way, it's morally, I can't let it go.
Sure.
I can't find any sort of way to do mental gymnastics and say, well, it's their fault. They should have worked harder. How can it be a child's fault in that situation? It's children are innocent. And so, yeah, it just hasn't sat well with me that these are not issues that have ever been discussed on a city strategic plan. We did talk about in the strategic plan, let's make ourselves a caring community, but it was all about volunteering,
right.
Which is, I love volunteering, and we have a lot of great volunteers, and we have also a lot of great donors. But can we match the people who want to help with these kind of needs that are, in my mind, the most important?
Sure. And is that the answer? So more volunteer. So fix the roads is something that I think most of us can sort of grasp. Like, okay, we've got a city budget. Yeah. We fill the potholes. I don't know what we're talking about. Blacktop the road, whatever. All right, I didn't go to that kind of school.
Pretty
good.
Good.
But then with this kind of thing you're talking about, this food scarcity, this sort of inequality, is it that we under a Halley mayorship, is that the right thing? Is it volunteer based? Are we looking at putting in government resources, looking at a local option sales tax? Like what kind of thing? How do we? It's a big issue. How do we address it?
So the city does not have a fund for any of this kind of thing because that doesn't fall within what the city is legally allowed to do. Even I had talked to our city attorney about a fund to help people with their water bill, and it turns out Iowa law or federal law or a combination of the two, prohibit a city from having a fund help certain people pay for their bill because it's considered discrimination. So wrap your head around that for a moment.
Okay.
Yep. So that's where churches step in. You know, that's where the private sector of people who have big hearts and want to help will step in and help people out. And they have, and God bless them. And that's really what the solution here is. If the city, again, we have local option sales tax, we do a grant program every year. That could help a little, you know, and it would. I know it would. But again, that carry-on bags program, put an article in the paper 2 weeks ago announcing again that they're running out of money. They'll run out by December at this rate. And I don't like to finger wag and say, you know, you should be donating, because it's up to anybody to donate whatever they want to wherever they want. But I also know that you can create a culture in a community. Mayor Malloy was great about a culture of sustainability where people just said, hey, aren't we supposed to be going green? And then they would make decisions that supported that. And then we were doing our health and wellness. Aren't we supposed to be a healthy community? And then people they'd support decisions in that area. So I say, well, let's double down on becoming a caring community, a compassionate community, because I can't think of anything that we could be prouder of than to tell people that we take care of our own, and to be known for that, and to set an example for that, and to be a role model in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, so, and I'm sure, like you said, there are so many moving pieces, even within something, you know, like a city government of 10,000, that you kind of have to get there and sort of work with people and see that. One of the things when I was Google stalking you over the weekend to prepare for this that did come up was your work with the Blue Zone project. And that's interesting to me because of the stuff that I follow. And a little pitch for my own program. Later this week, we're going to interview the prolific YouTuber, Mike the Vegan, who's from Fairfield, Iowa. And he talks a lot about Blue Zone stuff. So explain just kind of quickly what that is and what you did for that.
All right. So the Blue Zone was a designation of certain areas in the world where people tend to live longer and live healthier lives. And so I can't remember them all, but you know, there's
Loma Linda, California, Okinawa in Japan. Those
Italy,
are the only two I'm remembering off the top of my head.
Yeah, there was an area in Italy. And so this group, this gentleman who wrote this book, what he did was find the common threads and take those and see if we can bring those to other communities. And so the common threads were mostly a plant-based diet. So I'm sure Mike the Vegan grabbed onto that one. And movement, you know, daily movement, so not being sedentary. But what was interesting was, I'd say about half or more of these principles, which I've forgotten all of them, but I remember the ones that I thought were most interesting, and they were more psychological. They had to do with having a purpose. You know, the people who have a purpose live longer because they have some reason to get out of bed and to keep living. So for me, that's my children. I never want to die because I don't want to ever say goodbye to them. So I'm going to try to live as long as I possibly can to be with them. Feeling connected. So people who feel disconnected are often the ones who struggle the most with depression and those kind of things. I mean, I've seen a TED Talk where a gentleman said that addiction was the result of losing connection with other people. So, you know, we're social beings, and connection is vital. And they talked about downtime. So wine at 5 was one, you know, that this certain culture always had a little glass of wine in the evening. But that's where also meditation and that kind of stuff comes in. So what happened was Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield partnered with this Blue Zones organization. And so they did some work, I think, in Texas, and don't quote me on this, maybe Michigan. And then they brought it to Iowa, and any community who wanted to be involved could get involved. We had to actually apply and go through this whole process. But basically, you have to get a group together, and they give you all these goals in all these different areas. And if you meet those goals, you get to have the designation of a Blue Zones community. And so I was in that kind of the early group that applied. And then they said, oh, we're only going to do big cities. So small cities had to wait. And then they came back to us. And I wasn't actually initially on the board. But what happened was somebody was stepping down from the restaurants, trying to get these restaurants to make these little changes, like take the salt shaker off the table and make sure fresh water is available and optimize your menu so that the healthiest choices were at the top, etc. The person was like, I can't do it anymore, sorry. So I was asked to come in, and it's a little humble brag, but I'm good at getting stuff done. So I just got them all done really quickly. And then I was like, all right, what's next? I'm like, well, can you help with the government stuff? It's like, all right. And that's where I brought the Complete Streets to council, brought a breastfeeding policy and all these other things, got that done. So we got it all done, and we got the designation. They did a really cool video you can find on YouTube where they talk to us about some different things. But the frustration was I was working with the Jefferson County Health Department, and the issues like food insecurity and mental health weren't in there anywhere. And so Blue Zones was kind of like checking off boxes, and the boxes were determined by someone other than the community. So what we were hungering for was, well, we want to address issues that are unique, maybe not unique, but that are challenges here. Yeah. So kind of wrapped up Blue Zone. Wellmark has since discontinued their partnership with Blue Zone, and now they have Healthy Hometown. And you might say, why is a insurance company promoting health and wellness? Well, it's in their best interest financially to have healthy people.
Less money.
Yeah, right. Healthy people that pay insurance and never use it, right? So we'll find partnering with them, and we've done some things with them, kind of a walking study and such with them as well. But like I was saying, it's become obvious there are areas that aren't covered in those kind of things that maybe are more county issues. So counties do have budgets for mental health issues and budgets for food insecurity and such. And so Mayor Michael would like to partner more with the county.
Sure.
And it's really just connecting the people who need it with the resources.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who just don't know there are resources available. I want to tell a quick story.
Sure.
Because kind of a little emotional, but a young mother, a single mother, came to the food pantry and I guess had just not thought of that before. So she comes and she gets her box and she says, I can't believe this. Is this all mine? And I say, yeah, this is your box. And she says, I haven't eaten in 3 days so that my daughter could eat. And I hear that story, and first of all, that's the power of parental love, right? I mean, we would give anything for our children.
Yeah.
But that she didn't go sooner. After day one of not eating, it didn't enter into her mind, go to the food pantry. After day two, finally come and get the food. So that's an example of somebody in need not knowing where the help is located.
You hear a story like that and you think we're talking about, I don't know, some other country or something like that, some third world country. I mean, this is right here in the heartland, in the breadbasket of America. I mean, it's something that if you win the election, we'll have you back on for one of our normal 2-hour shows, and we could talk about healthcare and especially mental health, because I'm a psychiatrist all day long about how Iowa's number 50 and Jefferson County and some of the unique issues with suicide and then some of the amazing things that Tracy Liptek and Optime have done within the community with Nancy Lonsdorf and some of those people to address suicidality and so forth. I'm already going down the rabbit hole. Gonna pull myself back. Now, knowing that you and then on Friday your opponent, Ms. Boyer, is going to be on the show, I put out a post on Facebook to ask people if they had things they wanted to ask, and we got one and only one response, but I thought it was very, very good. So I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask her when she's on the show. So this particular person asked, they're concerned about LGBTQ issues and said that they wanted you and your opponent to address your voting record and kind of what your views are on inclusivity and the LGBTQ community and so forth. So, all right, Mike is yours.
I don't really know the voting record reference. There aren't that many issues that have been local. I tend to support candidates on other levels who are inclusive. So I strongly oppose any sort of discrimination or prejudice, and I'm quick to point it out and challenge people. I actually had to challenge a fellow city council member once who referred to meditators as those people over and over again in a meeting, and I pulled her aside afterwards. I said, we're all people. We're not this person or that person. So it's the same way with the LGBTQ. They're people. They deserve the same rights. They deserve the same respect. We had a topic come up a few years ago where the school board elections became very politicized over this issue. There was, I think, 1 or 2 transgender students at the high school. The law is, federal law is, you cannot discriminate against them. And so if they are registered at the office as a certain gender, they have a name designation that matches that gender, and they're kind of locked into that for the school year, they can use the bathroom that is associated with the gender of their choice. So there were all these kind of false red flags that, you know, anybody could walk into any bathroom at any time, which wasn't the case at all. And several people stepped up to run for school board to stop this, which would have really meant cutting off our federal funding, which would have been really bad. But they still wanted to you know, run on kind of an ideological issue, and none of them won. And so it was, in a way, a real kind of victory that showed the town is tolerant, like I talked about earlier, and wants to be inclusive. I have a transgender family member. I'm not going to be specific because he asked me not to.
Sure.
And my personal experience is that the essence of the person remains regardless if they transition from one gender to another. Mm-hmm. And I think we can all agree that people should be treated with basic respect and no one should be bullied. And I know that group has been bullied and has been mistreated and does have higher suicide rates, and we can do better than that. And so what I want to talk about, you know, even more is that inclusivity. Yeah. And inclusivity, the wonderful thing about inclusivity is it really means inclusivity. So it means everybody, even the people who maybe, you know, are a little bit more traditionalist or aren't on board with this, well, they still get a seat at the table. Everyone gets a seat at the table. And so that's a group that I specifically would love to reach out to and kind of bring into the fold of being a little bit more involved. Younger people in general aren't really heard. They don't have status, and so they're easy to ignore. But I want to change that. So I want to hear more voices, including from the LGBTQ community, and just make sure that, again, we're creating that culture of acceptance. And government can't get inside people's hearts and minds and change them. Obviously, that's, you know, there are going to be individuals who are going to speak out against this and such. And what I don't want to become is intolerant of intolerance, where you start condemning people for their beliefs, even if their beliefs are hard to swallow.
Sure.
So the inclusivity it's more or less live and let live. You know, if somebody's unique and personal lifestyle choice isn't harming someone else, it's something they're doing just for themselves, that you can, you know, let go of your judgment enough to just let them live in peace. If you want to judge them quietly, have at it, but just, you know, no abuse, no bullying. We're just not going to tolerate that kind of stuff.
As we've said a couple of times, Fairfield is an interesting microcosm for that because we began by talking about LGBTQ, but the last statement you just said, which I thought was beautifully put, and I agree 100%, that could be attributed to a meditator family, a townie family, which, to be stereotypical, although not for sure, you know, in Jefferson County, there are Trump voters and there are other side voters. And so, you know, like you say, should we exclude one voice at the table? I'm a huge proponent of free speech. One of the reasons I started the show, one of the reasons I wanted to have you and your opponent on for this, I think again, it's so vital that we have these conversations. And very few things make me more irritated when people refer to us as a flyover state. Oh, yeah. And between the military and all the various graduate schools I was in, I've lived on the different coasts. And I always want to point out to people that Iowa was the first state to have open marriage for LGBTQ individuals. And so, you know, for all the people that would write us off as hayseeds or something like that, I mean, these are real events happening everywhere, and they're happening here as well. So, okay. One of the reasons that we wanted to kind of have this talk All right. And whether it's national politics and people grabbing people's anatomies or deleting emails or whatever the national scuttlebutt is, to the state elections down to local elections. All right. People are going to talk, people are going to gossip, and issues come up that, this person says that and so forth. And so rather than lead us into anything, when you and I first started talking about you coming on and Connie coming on, you had talked about wanting to come on and address some particular issues that you want to get out to the voters in Fairfield. So once again, the mic is yours.
All right. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's an issue that came up even 10 years ago when I first ran for city council. And I remember talking to friends and journaling that I thought this could be a great opportunity to address this issue in a larger audience. And I don't know if I just lacked the courage at the time or just didn't have an opportunity to do so. So it never really happened. But the issue is domestic abuse. And it's hard to say that I've been both the victim of it and the perpetrator of that in my life. The story briefly is, I grew up in a household where there was abuse, and it was passed on father to son, son to brother. And I was the next to youngest. And I look at these kind of things as, I remember how I was as a young child. I was actually, I was extremely empathetic, almost to a fault. I remember one time my dad had a June bug and he flicked it and I started crying. I was like, what's the matter, Michael? I was like, Dad hurt the bug. And he had to go find a June bug and show it to me and say, see, it's fine. It's got a hard shell. So that was always my true nature. And so if you think of as a child or anybody as, like a straight piece of rope, and then abuse starts and it starts tying all these knots, these things that are just you're not the way, you could be. You're not as straight and well formed. And you take that into your adult life. And I came into my adult life consciously saying, I will never behave the way these family members behave towards me. I will never treat somebody like that. I know what that feels like, and I would never do that to someone. Mm-hmm. And then I get in my first real intimate relationship, and I start acting that way, which was confusing and extremely shameful for me. And it was so shameful that I didn't seek help right away. I didn't know what to do with it. I felt completely split. I had the person that if you interviewed would say, yeah, abuse is wrong. And I was raised by my mom, to be very equal rights. And I would say all that and I would believe it. And yet this other part of me was behaving in a way that was completely not integrated with that. And it really wasn't until my ex-wife and I, when she was pregnant with her first child, that I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be this person. I'll never be the kind of father in that negative way. I don't want to say my father was completely negative, but in those ways, I don't want to be that to my children. And so I sought counseling, and I did some anger management, and it helped, but it was the kind of surface level, take a deep breath, count to 10 kind of thing. And again, it was a step in the process. It was, I opened the door to that and walked through. And those knots, aren't so easily untied sometimes. And so I had to continue to go and talk with different therapists and work on it over the years. And it got to the point where it was in the past. And my ex-wife at the time acknowledged that. And it was great to be seen, for the progress that I'd made, that I saw the issue clearly, I addressed it, I did what needed to be done and changed my behavior. And then our divorce came. And again, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to talk about my ex-wife. She doesn't want to be talked about either. Sure. But I can just simply say that the narrative changed, and the narrative became that I was abusive from day one to the last day. And that narrative was spread far and wide for reasons I don't fully understand. I understand that it could have been used to gain an advantage in the divorce proceedings and the custody especially, to frame it that way. But it was really shared really publicly, and this is 2007. And I struggled with it. And then I think the kind of the deepest, darkest time of my life was 2008, when my ex-wife moved to South Dakota with our children. And I was lost. I mean, I had been their full-time dad for 3 years while I was doing night school. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt myself slipping into despair, and that's when I turned to service. I started volunteering, and it helped. And so I really got kind of caught up in just volunteering as much as possible, serving on boards and commissions and doing all that kind of work, just in a selfish way to keep myself from being depressed. And then I saw this opportunity to run for city council, and I had the thought, like, with my past, who am I to run for this position? Who am I to step up and say, vote for me to serve as a representative on this council? I struggled with it because I've struggled my entire adult life, especially post-divorce, with feelings of I don't deserve anything good, that I've done these bad things, and therefore I don't deserve to be financially well off. I don't deserve to have a happy relationship. I mean, these are things that I've fought with and struggled with. But as I've untied those knots and straightened myself out and gotten back to my true nature of compassion and empathy, I can stand up now. I can say, I want to be the mayor of your town, and I really am the best candidate. And I can say that with complete honesty because I've integrated myself. I decided I couldn't live a double life anymore. So there's nothing in my private life that I'm ashamed of anymore. Mm-hmm. If I was in the Truman Show and there was a camera on me all the time, there's nothing to hide. I've integrated myself in that way. And that is why I can stand up now and say, I'm asking for your vote to be my mayor without any reservations, right, without any hesitation. So there are people, and I completely understand, especially if you've ever been in a situation of abuse, who can't forgive. And that's them. That's on them, and that's fine, because it isn't my place to tell somebody else how they should respond to hearing this. And if they don't vote for me because of that, I accept that. I accept that because I have done things in my past, and that can't be undone. And talking about it now doesn't undo it. And my record of service doesn't undo it. It's not as if somehow, me giving back to the community erased that. It's always there. And there, we all have to, like, my ex-wife and I have to live with it, and she has to live with it, and I can't undo that. And so I accept that. I accept if somebody says, this is a reason I can't vote for this person. I accept that. However, if I win the election, I hope people will give me the chance they gave me 10 years ago. I remember when I was running, that's all I wanted. I just wanted to, give me a chance. I will work so hard for you. I will give this all my all. And I feel like that even more now. I just want that opportunity to serve and to just to make people's lives better. It's really that simple. I just want to help people.
Yeah, you got caught up, it sounds like, from all of that and from kind of the things you hear right in the midst of cancel culture, which is big right now, kind of in the national conversation. I mean, sort of, what are your, that was very well explained. Like, what do you think about cancel culture kind of broadly across the spectrum? It seems like it's more and more of a trending thing on all the different social media platforms.
It really is. It's interesting because two people that I take inspiration from, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. I was listening to NPR a couple weeks ago, and there's a movement in India to take Mahatma Gandhi's face off of the currency because early in his career, he wrote racist things about Africans. And so, again, cancel culture. Okay, he did that, so all the other things that he did are canceled. You can't revere the man any longer. Right. Martin Luther King Jr. apparently had an issue with infidelity. Not a problem I've ever had. Being faithful has come easy to me. But for him, that was a weakness. Does that take away from what he did for civil rights? I think we're in this area. If you look at, like, the heroes on TV, I've been watching a TV show on Netflix with my 16-year-old, and he says, what's the story here? Because the character is not necessarily a good person. The show is Dexter, so it's a serial killer who only kills serial.
I love that show.
Exactly.
It's a great show.
But he's like, we're in season 6. He's like, what's the moral here? I'm like, well, guys, this is how it is these days is we have these kind of gray heroes, right? Walter White from Breaking Bad. It was like, well, he's the protagonist, but he was also kind of the antagonist. And so I think people are growing towards an understanding that no one is perfect. Like one of my favorite superheroes, well, I'll say it. My favorite superhero is Batman. I love the story that this person had this tragedy as a child, but then turned that pain into something good and doing things for others, in a nutshell. Flawed character, though. Superman is not interesting. No one cares about Superman. He's perfect. No one likes a perfect person anymore. So there's a group that's kind of like, you know what? Michael Jackson may or may not have done some of the things he did. I'm not going to throw out his albums because I still recognize he's a gifted musician. Some other people are like, I'm throwing him out. I don't want to hear his music. I'm done with him. And so, again, it's when it involves children, it's, you start getting into some stuff. I mean, I've struggled with it. I've got a few songs on my phone and I'm like, do I keep them? Can I enjoy them? It's really, we're struggling. Like collectively, society is trying to make sense with this. And then you have the thing with Carson King, where the guy like does this great thing and raises millions of dollars for a children's hospital and attempts to get taken down for some teenage resharing of a tweet. I never saw the tweet to know how racist it was, but and people backlashed. They said, come on, like that's going too far. You're trying to tear this person down for doing this good thing based on this. And that to me is forgivable. A teenager sharing something that, and he even came out straight up, apologized, did the right thing, apologized for any hurt feelings. So yeah, it's, I don't have an answer. I mean, it's really, we're all kind of grappling with it, but the founding fathers of our country owned human beings. I mean, the Constitution has racist portions in it where a slave was considered 3/5 of a person, right, according to census. There's no women's right to vote in the Constitution, so it's a sexist. The original was a sexist document. So, if we can just look at that honestly and say, okay, that was acceptable then. Now, no, it's not. Absolutely not. We're working towards a more equal and fair and just world for people of all different types. But we also have to understand we're still doing that. We haven't arrived. And I think some people get frustrated when they want it to be perfect now.
Right.
We get that in our community. Some of the idealistic, it's like we want a clean community now. We want to everything to be that way immediately.
One of my favorite quotes, and you can take this with you, whether you wind up in the mayor's seat this time or in the future. And I don't know who said it originally. The first time I heard it was by the British theologian's not really the right term because he was such a rabid atheist journalist named Christopher Hitchens. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so you're talking about we need to help the poverty in Fairfield and in lots of towns across the country. Well, but it won't be absolutely perfect if we only do whatever else. Therefore, we should do nothing. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So, all right, we for these special editions, both for you and for Connie here later this week, we said we were going to wrap up in an hour versus our normal 2-hour show. I would love to spend the next 30 minutes talking about cancel culture and a variety of other things with you, but we are going to wrap up here. So what I want to do here at the end is to give you kind of the last word. So on the 3rd of December, and any of you listening that are citizens of Fairfield that have the right to vote, please get out and vote. Whoever it is that you vote for, I'm going to guess that the 1,055 people that voted for you are going to vote for you. And I'm going to guess that the 883 people that voted for Connie are going to vote for Connie. But that leaves 277 that voted for Ed. And I looked this up before we came here. In Jefferson County, there are 10,318 voters. Not all of them, I'm sure, in Fairfield. But so let's say that I'm somebody who voted for Ed, or I'm somebody who didn't vote. Why should I cast my ballot for Michael Halley? Go.
All right. The major reason is that I'm in a position, kind of a unique position, to help usher in the next generation of leaders. And I don't say that I'm the only one who can do that, but I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm kind of between the millennials and the boomers, who fight way too often. I want to bring everyone together, find the things about Fairfield that are universally loved, and start working on those. And so my background in city government means I know what I'm talking about. I know what the mayor's position is. I know what it isn't, and I know what to do. And so we're going to jump in next year, if I'm elected or not. But we're going to do a strategic planning session for the next 5, 10, 20 years, and it's going to be truly inclusive because we're going to take the time to reach out to all the aspects of the community, not just the people who are used to being listened to, but the ones who aren't. And we're going to take care of the basic needs. It's one thing about me that while I'm socially liberal, I'm fiscally conservative. So I really want to see the city continue its trend of living within our means, the city government, keeping property taxes as low as possible, not expanding and adding huge amenities that we can't afford, but just kind of taking a moment to reassess, pay for what we have. So I know that I can see that happen. I've already been working with the city government, and I know how to find those efficiencies and really develop what I call a culture of fiscal responsibility in the city. So from the city government side, people can rest easy knowing this guy's got his stuff together and knows what to do. And then there's a whole other side, and that's the community side. And so because I'm in touch with some of the younger generations, I understand that they just want to be themselves, without judgment. And I think that's pretty universal. I would love to see Fairfield become a haven, in a sense, for people who just don't feel like they fit in somewhere. Because I felt this, and I've talked to many people who felt this. They felt when they came to Fairfield, they could be themselves. And that would be a wonderful thing to develop further and to be known for, that if you just don't feel like you fit in somewhere, come to Fairfield and you'll find your niche. And not everyone has, but enough people have that it really says something about who we are. So for the community, it's expanding that compassion, expanding the caring, and just getting people plugged in. And that means inviting them. And so I just want to invite the people who haven't typically been invited. And that means the people who are used to be invited, they're also there. So no one's losing their seat at the table. We're just going to make the table big enough that if anybody wants to sit at it, they can. And what it's about is ensuring that the community that so many of us have worked so hard to create continues and grows and flourishes. Because, if somebody's in retirement age, this is the time or order they really start to look at their legacy. So what legacy do you want to leave? What is it you want to leave before you move on to the next realm? And while they're still young enough and engaged enough, wouldn't it be great to transfer knowledge, right? From the retired age to the young and up and coming, and to share in that, and to share into building something that will just take care of Fairfield into the future and expand upon all our good qualities that we already have. Yeah. So that's really my vision.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate your time to drive up here and to be so open and honest. You clearly seem to have a plan. You're a passionate guy. You seem to really care about the town and the work. And no matter what happens at the special election, I hope things turn out the way that you want. And again, I want to thank you so much. To all that are listening and watching, thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to have another video here really soon with Michael's opponent, Connie Boyer. And so stay tuned for that. And we'll see everybody the next time. Thanks so much, everybody.